Hi everyone. Today we have Gui Perdrix with us. This is our first podcast in the series of podcasts that we are going to do as part of the co-living family on PropTechBuzz. So Guy is an author of Art of Co-living. He's also the founder of Art of Co, which runs online co-living university and is a consultancy firm and have worked with more than 50 co-living brands across the world. Apart from this, he is also he's a music DJ, an electronic DJ. He plays it along with harp. You can find him playing in different venues across Europe. And after this, you should definitely go and check out his YouTube channel. Welcome, Guy. It's a pleasure to have
Thank
you
you.
here.
Thank you, Mayank. Big pleasure to be here, and thank you for hosting this first co-living session together.
Right. So, Guy, if you can tell us what you are currently working on and how do you kind of serve your clients and what do you do? It'll be great for us to understand that.
Sure. So, look, I have two main roles in the co-living scene at this point. On one side, I'm the president of Coliv, which is the global non-profit association of co-living professionals, representing around 5,000 professionals around the world. You, Mayank, know about it because you've been part of Coliv for many years. So that's one side, and on the other side, I'm consulting co-living operators or co-living entrepreneurs that want to set up co-living businesses with my consultancy Art of Co that you, Mayank, are also part of. And here really it's about working with co-living companies that really want to create great product or that want to scale up and that need help. And so these are the main things that I'm working on. And overall, my main mission in the co-living industry as a whole is like to create better experiences for residents. I really believe that co-living can be transformative as a lifestyle. It has impacted me in the past. It has impacted others, and it can impact so many more. And there really is a need to create better experiences for residents.
All right. That's very, very interesting to hear. But if you can deep dive a little bit into your background, where you come from, and what your co-living journey has been like, it'll be very interesting for us to know.
Yeah, so I don't know how much you know, but like my background, after studying, I was first in the startup scene in London and Paris. I was part of a project where we took a 2,000 square meter building and turned it into a co-working innovation space. And that was in 2017. I already had a thought of co-living at that time. We wanted to take a building and convert it into a co-living, but we didn't have the bandwidth to do that. And in 2017 was kind of a marking year because I kind of had a breakdown. I decided to like sell my belongings, become a nomad. And what I would do is for the first 2 years, I would go to different cities with my friends and we would create co-living spaces for like 15 people on average, 10 to 15 people. So that was called the lifestyle engineering houses. And we had some in Barcelona, in Tulum, and Tallinn, Estonia, and Bali. And then after hosting 4 houses of like 3 months average each, so we had like a year of co-living, I realized how transformative co-living was and that co-living was actually a thing. I was doing it by myself. I had no clue that there was an industry, that there was a co-living conference that was organized by Co-live at the time. So so that made me realize, okay, co-living is actually an industry, and I want to enter that industry, but not as an operator, because I would have to learn everything around team building, investment, real estate. I'd rather work with operators and help them improve their experiences. And that's when in 2019, I partnered up with Coliv to do a world tour visiting co-living spaces and writing a book out of all that research called The Art of Co-living. And then becoming president of Coliv to also host a co-living summit. And so, yeah, that's been kind of my background, basically, like doing co-living almost by mistake, becoming a co-living operator, realizing how amazing co-living is, but that I don't want to be an operator, and rather that I want to work with operators, and then creating my own position within the industry.
So you said you visited more than 200 co-living spaces as part of your world tour when you were writing Out of Co. So you must have had a lot of experiences. So why do you think co-living is popular? So there are different stakeholders in co-living, right? There are tenants, there are property owners, there are investors, there are operators. So why do you think co-living is so popular for each of those segments?
Yeah, so look, let's start off with first segment, right? The end user, tenants. Why is co-living popular? I mean, very simple. There's a housing crisis. I mean, almost everywhere, right? Like whether it's in India, whether it's in Europe, um, people are looking for housing, and we have more and more people that are flexible in their lifestyles. That, for example, are moving to a new city. That are dynamic. Maybe they're nomadic. So the need for midterm accommodation is just very high, and there's a higher demand and offering. Um, when we see, for example, like just I watched a documentary yesterday about the real estate scene in Paris. The demand for leasing places, so for renting apartments, has gone up 50% since last year in Paris alone. But the offer has gone down for the last 5 years consecutively. So there's this big mismatch, right? So from that side, co-living makes total sense because it offers people housing without having to go through an agency, without having to go usually through contracts, um, and it's a quick way to get access to housing. So that's from a tenant's perspective. Um, and we should add also that there's a culture whereby there's more and more people who are down to share. So, for example, even personally, I would love to live in a co-living where everybody would have their own micro studio of 30 square meters, and then everyone else could like share common areas. It doesn't exist in Lisbon, but if not, I would have moved in, because I personally don't need that much private space, and I wouldn't mind sharing. Actually, I would like to share with others. So this is cultural mind shift that helps from a tenant perspective. Now, from an operator perspective, co-living is becoming more and more popular because it is a way to manage real estate assets with a higher yield than traditional rent. And that's also why investors are getting curious about it, especially now after that co-living has been around for 6, 7, 8 years. We're seeing on one side that some operators have been able to survive and strive for like more than 5 years. So we're having some operators now that are getting very stable. Their model is proven, and hence now we're having also institutional investment coming in. What we're also seeing is that in the past, co-living used to be shared apartments, shared houses, and now these operators from the past have been professionalized, and now they partner up with developers to create 300, 400, 500, even more units at once. So the product is different. And that's attracting now, funds, institutional investors that before weren't interested in these micro living products.
So it's very interesting that you say that. In last 5 years, we've also seen a lot of companies like We Live or Collective or Quarters, right, struggling with their business models.
Yeah.
So do you think there is fundamentally some things that needs to change in the co-living business model, or it's just the process of evolution that we are seeing?
Mm. I mean, I actually would love to have your thoughts on it too, even though you're the interviewer. But like my guess is this: I think that first of all, there were a few co-living startups I know that had to make certain mistakes. So, for example, there was one startup called Campus, and they closed down. One of their main reasons was that they were giving their residents a veto right on new residents. So that meant that new residents would veto a lot of new residents, and so like places would be empty, and so they wouldn't be profitable. So I think some startups just made mistakes in terms of like how they set it up, and now we have way more documentation around how to actually create processes in co-living. But I think what changed fundamentally is this approach of how to build a co-living startup. The first startups that were created were really influenced by this American startup mentality, meaning coming in with like big funding, hiring a C-level team, creating a whole tech team and developing your own tech infrastructure, basically treating this like a tech product, kind of like WeWork did. And that leads to like massive hiring, that leads to like lots of expenses, that leads to not being focused. And I think that's why a lot of co-living startups also didn't work out, because they were based on this like hyper growth model that then didn't match any product market fit afterwards. And we're seeing like the ones that are surviving or striving today are the ones that were very lean from the very beginning. At least that's my observation.
So that so that you asked, my thoughts on this topic has been a little bit different. I think
Mm.
any industry that starts growing initially starts learning from the existing industry. So when co-living started growing as an industry, it started copying certain complementary industries, whether it was in commercial real estate, right? And when that model started scaling, we had a lot of learning. So there was a learning curve that happens at start of every industry. So a lot of
Yeah.
these companies that we see, where you said they made some mistakes, in my opinion, they had a learning curve where some things that they adopted from other industries worked and some didn't work. But now, as of today, the current companies in the co-living scene, they have a handbook with them of what worked, what didn't work. They are much better equipped with all that knowledge in order to kind of evolve the co-living business model. So in my opinion, the business model is evolving. When we started, it was more now it is a lot more investor, developer, operator. A combination of those three are starting to come up, and that is making it more and more sustainable. So that is how I kind of look at it. What do you
Mm.
think about that?
Yeah, I think that look, I think it makes a lot of sense. And also, and it's kind of like, to me, that's related to like my first point, where like a lot of co-living startups were just doing mistakes, and they didn't have documentation. They didn't have this knowledge that we have today. Like if you want to create a
Right.
co-living space today, like there's people, whether it's consultants like us or even like other operators, that can help you and literally tell you like, look, here's the book of processes, and here's how you onboard residents, and here's how you give responsibilities within the house, and here's how you deal with the community or house manager. And we figured out these processes by try and error. But at the time, they weren't figured out yet, right? So people had to do try and error, and they had to commit mistakes, fail fast, right?
So,
Like this in the California world.
so we have evolved. We are evolving as an industry and maturing as an industry. So, on that note, one of the very interesting conversation that I keep having with people, um, how like, and they keep asking me, and that is one thing that I want to ask you today, is that how do you see co-living becoming more scalable? Right? I know it has achieved a certain scale, which is more than what the counterparts did in last decade. But how do you seeing it reaching to more larger audience, becoming a mass market product? And not being restricted to like a certain 5% audience on the spectrum. Like, how do you see it becoming more scalable and profitable? And within that, what challenges do you see that we as a co-living industry will have to overcome?
Yeah. Look, I think the main challenge of co-living to scale doesn't lie so much on the demand side, because, like for example, with Out of Co, we've been like consulting so many different types of co-living businesses. And some of them are for seniors, others are like for niche topics like entrepreneurs. Like literally in terms of audience size, co-living can appeal really to a wide audience, whether it is people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, or 20s, right? It truly doesn't matter, even families with kids. So my thought is more, how can we increase the supply side of co-living? And here I would say that there's a couple of roadblocks. Number one, I believe that once we have better legislation around co-living, we're gonna be able to bring in more players actually into the industry. At this point, it's still often a gray zone when you try to do a co-living development, for example. Are you then going into like a hotel licensing, a student housing licensing, a sui generis licensing, etc.? So I think that's holding back. And then the second thing is, um, with that would come more, for example, banks that be specialized in co-living. So to give you a different perspective, in Switzerland, actually specifically in Zurich, 40% of the housing are actually cooperative structures. And you have dedicated banks in Switzerland for co-ops that are specialized in taking a building with different residents, creating an entity around it, and raising money for that building so that everybody in that building is then also co-owner. And you have dedicated banks for that type of investment and for that type of loan. If in Europe right now you go to a bank and you tell them about your co-living business, a lot of them don't even know what it is, and there's no one that's really specialized in it. So we're gonna see, I think, with time, also more capital, especially through banks um, being opened to co-living, and that will allow more people, especially more private individuals like us, to also enter the co-living business. And maybe not by creating a brand that's going to have 10,000 residents, but it can be one that has 5, 15, 20, maybe like 30 residents with a few houses. And I think that we're going to see more and more coming. Like, I was, sorry to talk so much, but I was currently at a conference, at the Nomad World Conference, and I was in this room. There were like 70 people, and I asked like, "Hey, who is interested in co-living?" Almost half the people raised their hands because they were interested in creating a co-living business, which really blew my mind. A couple of years ago, that wasn't the case. So I think that we're gonna have really a lot of people who are going to create or try to create co-living spaces, and some of them will become co-living businesses.
Uh, so on the same thought, right? What are your thoughts on technology being a driver to profitability in the medium to large scale co-living businesses? How important role technology plays, and what are your thoughts on people building it in-house versus uh, like people trying to use some existing SaaS products?
Mm. Mm. I mean, there's a lot of uh, co-living entrepreneurs that their first thought is they want to build a tech in-house. Because usually what happens is this, like you want to create a co-living space, then you compare all of the technologies that are out there. Then you realize there's no technology that really matches all of your needs. And then you think that you want to create your own one. From my experience, I've seen that the ones that have developed their own prop tech um, have not succeeded, and usually after a couple of years they actually stop it to switch to something that's more cost effective. It's really, really rare to have co-living spaces that stick to their own technology. um, so my first thought is this, like, one, when you start your co-living business, maybe start saving costs straight, go for solutions that are already existing, because you have some that exist that you can do like 90% of what you want to do with, and save that money to invest into somewhere else. um, my my second thought is technology is super important, right? Like, and Mayank, you know it best. Um, Technology is super important, and all of co-living operators need it to have better understanding of like how to fill their beds, for pricing flexibility, for managing the space. And technology saves a lot of time. So it's really important actually to have the right tech. Um, it's really important to have the right tech. And nowadays you do have a lot of solutions out there as property management solutions that kind of can satisfy your needs.
So one thing that I've seen as a trend when we were at the start of 2020, 2021, a lot of existing solutions were being retrofitted and used in the co-living industry. There were no specific solutions which were built for co-living industry, but that has changed in last 2 years across different geographies in the world. I've seen so many co-living specific products coming up, whether it is from AI enabled chatbots to property management softwares to tenant experience softwares or to tenant onboarding softwares, right? So every geography has now come up with specific solutions to co-living, which I think will be a big contributor in defining the profitability of co-living business models, because that technology has ability to bring a lot of efficiency into the system, and this can completely change the outlook of different people into the co-living market, because a lot of people right now see co-living market as an extension, right? But they are not really confident about it. But I think that's gonna change in next couple of years, because a lot more profitable companies will start coming up just because they have now been enabled and tech enabled in the right way. So yeah, I think that's that. Those were my few thoughts on technology and co-living. But I would be
Yes.
interested to know. Yeah, sorry, you were saying something.
No, yeah. I guess maybe the other thing, and maybe that's something that we should like write about, but there's also different types of solutions for different stages, right? Usually what we're seeing is that a co-living operator Starts with like a few houses, still uses spreadsheets, maybe like one or two tools. And then once you have around 50 residents, that's when you want to start changing a system. And then it change up to like 500. And when you're at 500, then suddenly you're building maybe your first building, and then you need suddenly something else. So there's like these different stages, and you might have to switch like once or twice across your entire growth path. Um, but there are solutions for each stage.
Oh, that's a very interesting point, and I think a lot of people missed it. They either become over dependent on the tech and start using something which is way advanced for their stages, or they start adopting it very late in their life cycle of the product life cycle or growth of co-living business. So I think this is also very important, that what kind of tech tool you choose at what particular time in your co-living journey, and I think that makes a lot of impact.
Yes, and that's
I can vouch for it.
Yes, and that's why, like, at Out of Coral, so whenever we work with someone, what we do is like we map out the experience of the resident, and then from there we know what what do we need in terms of like team support. So like, where does a community manager come in at these stages, but also what do we need in terms of tech. And it's really important that we map out that tech experience before we start building, because then we can think about stuff like access control, integrations, energy efficiency, and and then we can plan them in. So it's really important from the very beginning, once you have an idea of like what type of building you want to build, uh, or, or 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 open, then to put yourself in the shoes of the residents and really go through each stage. What's happening once I book? What's happening on the day I'm arriving? What's happening 1 week after? How does my in-house life look like? How can I get involved in events? And then from there, seeing like, okay, what is the technologies that I'm using? Am I using WhatsApp? Am I using a specific in-house app? Am I using like another app? All of these things need to then be decided.
That's a very interesting approach, because that makes it very clear in terms of where you are and what you need.
Yeah.
So, taking that thought ahead, what are you seeing are the opportunity areas within the co-living industry? So, just to kind of give a little bit more context, do you think a lot more smaller co-living spaces should kind of come into picture, and there is a lot of market for interest-based co-living, or do you think there is a lot of market for large-scale kind of co-living developments? What are the pockets of opportunity? So if somebody wants to get into the co-living scene now, what are few things that they can look at initially? Do you have some thoughts on that?
Mm-hmm. Look, actually I think that there's not, so I think there's opportunity in terms of every typology of co-living. So maybe let's clarify that, right? In our opinion, there's like three main typologies of co-living. One is apartments, shared apartments. The other one is like shared houses, and the third one is like shared, like large developments. So for whatever typology, I think there's gonna be growth and demand. What's more interesting is looking about what can differentiate you right now, because most of co-living concepts right now are targeting young professionals, millennials. They're in urban environments, um, and there's a few things that are missing. For example, we're missing co-living for seniors. There's a huge demand for that, but there's not enough of operators who are doing it. Some operators are switching now from millennials to seniors, or like are opening this vertical up. So seniors is a big one. In general, also like seniors and young seniors, um, families or single parent families is also a huge audience that's not really been tapped into. And then niche interest co-living, yes. But I think also what's going to be long term more important is creating new models. What I mean with that is, we talked about the cooperative model in Switzerland, right? Right now, for example, in France, there's actually no legal model for a co-op, meaning rent, whereby, for example, a certain part can be converted in co-ownership, cannot exist. So we're having like legal challenges, and I think one of the challenges long term for co-living is how can co-living be actually a long-term living option? Because right now people move out after a year. What I'm interested in is who's going to create a concept where residents will stay 15 or 10 years in that house, and that would change the perspective of like what's this concept about, and especially also like what is co-living about. And I think the notion of co-ownership needs to come in. Right now, it's pure rental. Um, uh, and whoever is able to create a new type of like business model around co-living, I think is going to have a huge advantage. Huge advantage.
Okay, so one thing that is talked about the most, right, is the community aspect of co-living, right? That's what everybody tries to sell when they're doing their marketing communications. But I would like to take a different approach, right? I would not ask you to define what is community. Rather than I would ask you, what are the myths that people think about community, which are really the myths and not the facts. If you can throw some lights on, according to your experience, what do people feel that, okay, no, this is something that happens, or this is what community is, but that's not the right way, or that's not the way to think about community. So if you can burst some myths today for us and for our audience, that'll be great.
Yeah. Okay. I guess a couple of things. One, community takes time, right? Yeah. Even if you organize your first event, you have everybody together and you take a group picture and you're like, yeah, that's our community. Community takes time because community is relationships. It's a bunch of individual relationships. And the more individual relationships you have, the stronger the community is. So if you want to have a strong community, it does take time. Second, you always going to have ups and downs in community building. Even if you do everything right, usually this curve from your side looks kind of like this. It's like you enter the co-living, there's a big hype, and then things start settling in, and then eventually you hit a sort of low because people just go about the day. There's not anymore this hype that you had at the beginning. People start like becoming annoyed about small things. And then you're gonna go up again, and it's kind of the sinus curve the whole time, and it's almost inevitable. So knowing that is very interesting because you can do what however much you want, but you're gonna have curves and you're gonna have ups and downs, and that leads to I think the number three principle number three, which is you need to work on community. It doesn't happen by itself. It can if you are lucky, but usually it doesn't. And that's why it's important to care about the health of the community, as I call it. And there's certain things you can do. There's certain co-living operators, for example, they create once a month. You have like an open event where everybody can share how they feel about the co-living space. You know, like what they like, what they don't like, what they like to improve. So kind of giving space for people to actually um, to express how they feel about one another, about their living situation, and how they could contribute is really important.
That's pretty interesting because in my experience, the way I've seen people doing community is always top down. But I think for most part, the best communities that you see out there in the world are built bottom up, right? When there is uh, when people who are part of the community starts contributing in building the community, that's where true community spirits start coming into the picture. And that is something that all of us needs to understand, that it's not just about doing a bunch of events and trying to get people together and saying that we have a community, but it's a lot more than that and a lot more nuanced than that.
Yes, and actually, and then there are ways to incentivize residents as well to get engaged, right? You can create ambassador programs. You can incentivize residents for like good behavior that's community driven. So
Interesting. I think taking it ahead, what are some? So if our audience is big on understanding what are the trends, what are the mega trends. So if you can touch upon a couple of trends that you are seeing while you're working with these different co-living spaces around the world, what are that two or three trends, if you want to mention, that are like that you're seeing emerging right now?
yes. All right, I'll shoot them out of my head. I guess trend number one is we're having more and more new type of co-living professionals. What I mean with that is people that come from the student housing background, people that come from the hotel background, people that come from traditional built to rent background. So there's a huge amount of like switchers in the industry that go now into co-living because the co-living concept seems very interesting. Second trend is actually what I found very interesting is there are a lot of co-living operators that understand that quality is important because they're in competition with others. And hence they start investing into things such as experience or community building. Our friends from Conscious Co-Living, they just launched this program around like community building, and they got like 20 operators to work with them. Although like 2 years ago when I was testing that, almost nobody was interested. So that's a big switch. That means that we have operators that understand the value of like a good experience, of a good community, of a good team behind that, of good processes behind that, and they're ready to invest. So that's very interesting. Um, and then some other trends that are shaping, I guess, one, there really is this cleavage, meaning this differentiation between those operators that want to be asset light, meaning not owning the asset but just renting it. And I'm seeing like less and less of these operators. And I'm seeing more and more of the operators that want to own their assets as well. They want to operate a house but also own it, and basically have like two ways to capitalize the rent, the operations, and the asset itself. So, so, so actually, I think in the future, uh, for me, I was a bit scared in the last couple of years that we're just gonna see like big brands coming up and kind of like a lot of reworks. But actually, I think that what's happening right now in the co-living scene is what's happening in the co-working scene too. That means that there was this one company WeWork that really blew co-living co-working out, and that allowed actually for a lot of local co-workings to exist. And because they differentiate themselves from this big brand. And so I think the same thing is happening with co-living. We're seeing like a few big co-living actors who are growing, who are in different continents. But what I'm really seeing as a trend is we have more and more small entrepreneurs, co-living entrepreneurs, real estate entrepreneurs, or people that actually have no experience in real estate that wants to enter the domain and create a co-living space. And so I think we're gonna see a lot of different types of spaces popping up in the next years.
Oh, that's pretty interesting to hear because I was recently talking to somebody in US, and they have a pretty big portfolio in real estate, but they still want to go into and venture into co-living. They want to convert their existing multifamily spaces into co-living spaces and wanted to learn about it. So I think that trend, I can vouch for it because when I talk to different people around the world, the the intention to come to co-living, looking at the benefits both from the tenant side and operator side, I think there's a huge interest that we're seeing from around the world. So I think that's definitely something that we need to look out for, and that's an area of opportunity for people who already have a first mover advantage in the co-living scene. So yeah, I think the last couple of things that I wanted for today's conversation was if you can give two nuggets of tips for people who have like 2 3 houses or 4 houses and now want to scale to, let's say, 20 houses or 25 houses, what are the two most important things according to you that they should keep in mind while they plan for their growth from 1 to 4 house to like 20 to 25 houses, or 20 to 25 like different assets within the co-living business that they are building?
Yes. Look, let's analyze it in terms of experience and technology. All right. So I'd say in terms of experience, what's really important is to figure out, okay, based on your model so far, what has been working, what hasn't, and how you're going to be able to replicate that experience if you scale up times four. So that's going to ask you certain questions such as, what is my team structure that I need actually? What's the business model and behind that? And then there's the part on technology. And this is where actually people should work with you, Mayank, because now is the time where you need to build a foundation for your future. And what I mean with that is you need to choose the right technology that's going to be able to support your growth in terms of property management platform, in terms of accounting system, in terms of website and booking platforms you're using. All of these things need to work and be interconnected, because if not, you're going to lose too much time. So tip number two, there's a lot of technologies out there. There's some people that know about these technologies that can save you time. Work with them. These will be my two tips. And the third one is join the industry, join and talk to people that have done it. There's a lot of co-living operators. Like, the co-living industry is super open. And we're seeing this at Coliv, at our masterminds. There's a lot of events in that scene, and there's a lot of other co-living operators that are also going through the same struggles that would love to share. So my suggestion is come and join some of the co-living events that are happening, especially check out the ones at Coliv and the ones that are out of Co, and talk to other peers in the scene, because the people that you're going to be working with right now, they're going to be here in 5 to 10 years too. The industry is just starting. So this is the right time to establish yourself also within the industry.
Thanks a lot for that, Guy. I think those are super, super valuable. I think to end this conversation, is there anybody who you are looking to connect with, or how do people connect with you after listening to this? If somebody wants to connect with you, how do they connect with you? If you can like lay that out, that'll be great.
Yes, look, it's very simple. Like connect, whether on LinkedIn, it's Gui Perdrix, or whether through a website out of Co. My look, who I would love to connect with is if anybody is out there that is currently trying to build co-living space, already has built a few and wants to like grow it and needs just advice or a sparing partner, because I'm realizing there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are very lonely in a journey. And I just need somebody to like exchange ideas, to bounce ideas, to get like feedback. I like to be that relationship in these projects. So if that talks to you, please write me, and that's it. I really wish everybody here in the scene all of the best to create like fabulous spaces, fabulous businesses, fabulous experiences, and to make co-living really an alternative to current living forms.
Thanks a lot, Guy. Thanks a lot for your time. Thanks a lot for sharing the knowledge nuggets. I'm sure a lot of people will find a lot of value in the last 35 minutes of conversation that we have had. And if they need more, they will definitely reach out to you. And we'll come back with another episode with you later on. But I think thanks a lot for taking out time and spending it with us today.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much.